what is really happening with Earth planet culture. So it's a comedy about how he can understand Earth culture. And I have here, let me just see if I can get to it. Yeah, the episode where he actually comes to Earth. And he lands in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. He gets picked up by this girl, and she takes him in as a roommate. I think they only get married like 3 or 4 years later. And what's interesting with this episode, this is episode 13, Mork and the Immigrant. He actually meets a Russian immigrant. And the Russian can't get papers, and he can't, he can't establish himself in the community. So for example, here is Mork, who's actually in, that's the Russian friend that he makes. Let me see if I can find this episode.
What about this? Oh, check this out. Pretend those popular people. They're Nemnos. Those are criminals. Nemnos, they're not too slave to me. Oh, this pen's on a leash. What's wrong? You can write a bad check? See, name? More. Observing the polluted planet and reporting back. This custom is too hostile. Oh!
I don't know. Well, there's a couple of scenes here.
Where's from? Oh, from the planet Rock, you see. It's in the photosphere of the galaxy Menlo Hatorius near the black hole Leon.
Oh, I see. And how did you get here? Boat? Plane?
Flying egg.
I see, I always go by flying bacon myself.
Express for Sizzler.
Now tell it like a drink.
Oh, don't be flown, you know that. With my finger.
Okay. Guard, would you please escort this gentleman out to his flying egg?
So you see here,
Going 78.
yeah, here's the discussion.
And if he never even been to the moon.
We call people who come here from other countries aliens.
Oh, that's strange. Everyone on Hawk calls himself an Hawk. You humans subdivide yourself into different species. Russians, Americans, Russians, Jews, game show hosts.
We do. I'm afraid that we haven't learned to live together very well yet.
Another thing I feel strange about is democracy.
Why?
All right, so
The second guy is the fuck, Jews, game show hosts.
okay, so that was the, you see, so here you have the confrontation about aliens and alien culture through an alien and not actually through the Russian guy who also has to go through the same thing. So here are the strange ways that we start to understand how aliens are brought into our discourse, popular discourse. Another thing, another aspect, then I started to look at video game culture. And there's SimCity 2, which my niece pointed out to me a couple years ago. This is a 2000 version, this particular game had this interesting aspect that you could actually invent an alien and introduce the alien into your community as part of the video game. So here, what you're looking at is that my niece invented this character, but I think it's part of the thing where you can actually bring in an alien, and then you set up your house and you set up your city. SimCity is a simulation city, and it was a game that from the very beginning allowed you to produce the workings of a city like Los Angeles with a fire department, a police department. You know, you had a building that would burn down, and you appropriated your money for the fire department, the police department, and other things. You might not have put enough money into the fire department to put out the fire in the building, and so then the building goes down. So that's how the game worked. And in later versions, you began to build houses, and then you began to build, you know, your whole little social life. And so here you see an alien comes into that picture. So that was another thing. And then finally there was this, I think Monty Python, which is one of my favorite shows, they came up with I think this was filmed in the 70s. This is the Flying Circus 69, yeah, the science fiction sketch, where they had a alien UFO radiate England into, so that everybody, all the men turned into Scotsmen. So once they turned into Scotsmen, then they ended up, England emptied out and they all moved to Scotland. And so that was it. So there's something very interesting where you actually have the disappearance of the national, where everybody just becomes an alien. So that's a nice reversal on the paradigm. So you have the planet where everybody, the planet is a singular alien in itself, to an idea where everybody in somehow transitions into the condition of alienness. And I think that that's something that's very interesting to read as a part of, you know, of contemporary popular culture, transmitted not through direct, coherent discourse, but a kind of hidden discourse of the metaphor of science fiction. So, and then this was another hilarious one, The Star Lost, which is 1973, starring Keir Dullea. Keir Dullea is the famous astronaut in 2001, the one who actually goes to the last scenes where he meets the great alien in 2001, the Arthur C. Clarke Kubrick concept film, where he understands the larger aspect of the universe, and he sits in that room. Remember, he gets old. He has this beautiful white room. That's the same actor who is in this horrible film called The Star Lost, and it's basically about these starships that are saving humanity by preserving communities as the Earth has been destroyed. And his community, if you can imagine, looks like this. And so he's actually living inside a pod on a spaceship, not knowing he's on a spaceship. And therefore, he's sitting there, and his community has become a completely retrograde event, you know, I would say Mormon style, or maybe some kind of religious sect. And there's this prohibition. Here he is challenging the fathers of his society and asking if he can ever get out of this door, which he sees there. And one day he sneaks out of the door and he flies in no gravity and finds this machine. And this machine then explains to him what he really is living in. And then, of course, he sees the huge spaceship and the other communities, of which he's now confronted with these guys. The costume design is way too much. Who are just another one of these bubble communities. So, you know, they now understand that there are other people that are living in completely separate worlds. So again, you know, there's this reproduction of Earth divisions and secularisms and religious, theological societies, all within a recreated spaceship that has already left the Earth, and so it doesn't even have to take the Earth with it. And then I haven't included I should have included District 9 and those films where you begin to start to see really amazingly interesting depictions of again, regular alien immigrants depicted as monster aliens. Okay, which brings me to the point of my discussion on Chinatown. I then worked, well, in and as much around the same time, I was working with a group called Urban Flashes. And Urban Flashes was an Asian-constituted group. We did this publication together. I co-edited this with Nicholas Boyarsky, who I'm going to ask to come in the final week of our reviews when we do the exhibition. So I'm trying to figure out when to get him here. But he and I edited this magazine, and Urban Flashes is about a group of people who work on a different kind of urban study, and that's what I would call the either microurbanisms. We also call it we call it urban acupuncture, microurbanisms. Nicholas Boyarsky talked about dirty cities. And the intention of this group from Asia was to examine life at a different scale, and that's more or less what I've been talking about since the beginning of class, in these classes, the idea of everyday life. We had a very big conference in Linz in Austria, and the participants, I was presenting Chinatown is Everywhere, Dirty Cities, Microurbanisms, and we had a number of very interesting studies on Asian and non-Asian cities. In particular, that front cover comes from Karl-Heinz Klopp's very intriguing urban study of Taiwan. This is the betel nut culture. Now, this girl, and let me see if I have an image, yes. What happens is that betel nuts are it's something you chew to give you energy. And the truck drivers in Taiwan chew the betel nut on their long trips across the island. And so betel nut, however, is illegal. So it's sold in order to attract the truck drivers. This whole pop-up culture of these window cabins are actually retracted into the wall, and at night they're pushed out. And these very cute young women are sitting in them to track the truck drivers. And then at the end of the night, then they push them back so they won't get caught by the police. And so this is the kind of microurbanism that we started to investigate, this idea that it wouldn't be like something, it's not permanent, but it is something that deals with the kind of nebulous ambiguity of urban function and need and legality and illegality in ways which responds through architectural expression in more mobile, fluid sense. So the betel nut girls, therefore, it's not a sex trade. It's simply attracting truck drivers to chew on betel nuts. And then we had Tinan Chi, who's one of the founders of Urban Flashes, and he is presenting his notion of microurbanisms, and I'll get into that in a second, studying a small phenomenon that are multiplied across an entire city. Also you had the reconstruction of the Solidarity of the Tao tribe, which was another Taiwanese kind of indigenous anthropological investigation into a tribe in Taiwan, as well as Furuya's This is a Hypercomplex Living. This was the illustration of the train that passes through the marketplace. And as you can see from these illustrations, the market folds onto the tracks and then goes off the tracks. And the calculation is that the train passes 8 times a day and takes 2 minutes to pass. So that a perfectly usable space is only unusable for 8 minutes or 20 minutes out of a whole 24-hour period. And so why not be able to use that kind of flexibility and overlappingness in order to produce a more vibrant, dynamic economy and microeconomy? And these were kinds of the lessons that we were, through the Asian group, bringing to places like the West in order to discuss some of the very, rigid rules that govern urban space in the West, and I'm sure here in Stockholm. So that kind of flexibility and dynamic capacity that the Asian culture is producing could be teaching us how to make our cities more vibrant. But you need to take, kind of a look at these phenomena to understand them first. And here you see in the Shinohara interview on Tokyo's district, light district, this was some of the first of the Japanese architects to take a look at their red light districts and their Times Square districts and understand the capacity and the overlapping of movement, dynamic and market capacities. And here, actually, Gary Chang, who turns out to be quite now a very well-known architect, was using the existing culture, this is the sex culture in China and in Hong Kong. These lights were indication of where brothels and topless joints would be, but it was only light information. And so by following these kinds of clues, you would be able to find where to go. And so this architect took that kind of confusion and began to integrate it into his own architecture. So there you have inspiration for a much more dynamic architectural language coming from the streets. Now, in my own studies, I was, extremely curious about how little Italy's, little Chinatowns were integrating all across of Europe and the United States, and elsewhere, as a matter of fact. So I became conscious of this. I actually lived in Chinatown in New York City from the 1980s, so I'm quite familiar with the kind of full integration of a sort of cultural and economic and social dispersion into neighborhoods the Chinese are doing. And so I kind of tracked what was going on in Naples, where they're controlling an enormous container shipping trade, so that China is directly dumping off its huge amounts of cheap clothing in Naples, and that's getting distributed through the system, through the mafia, through the secondary and tertiary economic systems, and then on to the rest of Europe. Here are some shots from Naples. You see the Italian posters over there, and then most of these are not for shopping. These are for merchandise. These are for for large-scale distribution. This is in Athens, and again, similarly, mostly for trading and large-scale sales, not retail. And then this is Paris. Where you have the enormous, in the Place d'Italie and area, an enormous community of Chinese immigrants. this whole district of the Olympiad has been turned, all the garages have been turned into a huge Chinese shopping area. I mean, you've been down there, right? This is the best place to go for anything you might need. Underground. In New York, Chinese neighborhoods with football, large-scale foods, everything from lottery, fortune-telling, food. And then in Florence, I'm going to do a little focus here. I love this little thing, the contraption using umbrellas. You remove the umbrella shade, and then you can easily open it and close it for with your hanging items to sell. So this is also microurbanism, the idea that you can produce these very flexible, very cheap display